Look, there's a theory. You reach a certain age and you give up your seat if you have the precedent. Well, look what happens to Justice Ginsburg. She was not exactly a young woman. The election was taken. They had a Democrat who could have appointed a liberal justice, and the liberals do stick together. There's one thing about those justices. They stick together like glue, not like the Republicans. But she decided that she was going to live forever. And about 2 minutes after the election, she went out, and I got to appoint somebody. So, you make the case that at a certain time, you give it up so that you can have a justice. In theory, it's 2 or 3, they tell me. If you just read statistics, it could be 2, could be 3, could be 1. I don't know. I'm prepared to do it, but when you mention Alito, he is a great justice.
That was President Trump moments ago on a Fox Business show in a previously taped interview, responding to speculation that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito may retire in the coming months. Let's bring in editor of SCOTUS blog and co-host of the legal podcast Advisory Opinions, Sarah Isgur. She's the author of the new book titled Last Branch Standing, a potentially surprising, occasionally witty journey inside today's Supreme Court. Great to have you back on. First, we're going to talk about what President Trump was saying, but give us a lay of the land of this Supreme Court in this moment in history. You call it the last branch standing, which is a great title.
So the idea is we're blaming the Supreme Court for a lot of our political problems, that they're the last word on all of these very deep culture war issues, and yet they're not democratically responsive, when in fact, a lot of the reason that we feel that way is because Congress isn't doing its job. They are supposed to rule on something like whether Mississippi can take ballots 5 days after the election, or whether the administration can stop people at the southern border and prevent them from applying for asylum, and then Congress can amend the law the next day. None of us believe Congress will do that. None of us believe that we could ratify an amendment to the Constitution. And so it puts all this pressure on the Supreme Court, and we blame them instead of blaming Congress for not doing their job and the presidency for ruling by executive order.
So there's a perception that the Supreme Court has largely sided with President Trump and sort of acquiesced to his wishes. We know that's not always actually the case. You argue in the book out yesterday that really it's not we should think of the breakdown as 3, 3, and 3. Tell us what you mean.
Yeah. So, for instance, President Trump has lost on tariffs. He lost on federalizing the National Guard, and we're pretty sure he's going to lose on birthright citizenship. And that lineup isn't 6-3 with the conservatives all on one side and the liberals on the other. In fact, last term, the same number of cases had liberals all in dissent, ideological lineup, as the same number of cases that had the liberals all in the majority and conservatives all in dissent. So the 3 justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson, are sitting at like a high school lunch table together. I have the Chief, Barrett, and Kavanaugh. There are deciders. They're the most likely to be in the majority over 90% of the time. And then what I call the conservative honey badgers, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, our YOLO libertarian justice.
Do you have any sense of Chief Justice Roberts' influence within the court among the other justices?
Absolutely. He is the most influential chief we've had in probably the modern Supreme Court history, because he gets to assign who writes that majority opinion. He also, of course, is one of those deciding votes at this point. And he wants unanimity. He is an institutionalist. So he is going to be more likely to take that paragraph out if it means getting Kagan to join the opinion. And you noticed more 7-2 opinions last term. That is a Kagan chief strategic, behind the scenes stuff going on.
Sarah, do you have any insight into how the justices and the group of them overall might be reacting to the public pressure that has been mounting in recent years, and sometimes the anger that they are not responsive in the way most Americans want or believe that they should be to public opinion? Is that something that influences their work in any way?
They are very aware of the court's approval rating, of what people are talking about. Some of them even lurk on social media. At the same time, they pride themselves on being an independent branch, sure, from the president, from Congress, from the partisan politics, but also being a counter-majoritarian branch, right? They are supposed to defend minority rights against the public. And so when they think about their roles, they think about John Marshall Harlan in Plessy v. Ferguson, the sole dissenter against segregation, and that everyone thought he was wrong at the time, but history has proven him right. You know, they all, when they take their oath of office, sign their names in the Bible that Harlan gave to the Supreme Court when he left, to remind them that what today's politics are, what today's culture is, isn't their job.
Wow. The new book is titled Last Branch Standing, a potentially surprising, occasionally witty journey inside today's Supreme Court. It's available now. Author Sarah Isgur, thank you so much. Come back. It was great to have you on today.
Thank you so much.